The gunshot echoed through the canyon just as the storm broke overhead, and Thaddeus Porter knew someone was in trouble before he even spurred his horse toward the sound. Rain hammered down in sheets as he rode hard through the rocky terrain, his hat doing little to shield his face from the downpour. The year was 1872, and Thaddeus had been riding the trail between Sacramento and Marysville, California, for the better part of 3 days, delivering a string of horses to a ranch outside town. He had not expected to find anything more eventful than muddy roads and perhaps a washout or two, but the crack of that rifle had changed everything. His gelding picked its way carefully down the slope, hooves sliding occasionally on wet stone. Thaddeus kept his eyes sharp, scanning the landscape for any sign of movement. The rain made it nearly impossible to see more than 20 feet ahead, but he trusted his instincts. Someone had fired that shot, and out here in the wilderness between settlements, gunfire rarely meant anything good. Then he saw her. She was stumbling along the creek bed, her dress torn and muddy, clinging to her frame in the relentless rain. Even from a distance, Thaddeus could see she was favoring one leg, limping badly. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles around her face, and she kept looking back over her shoulder as though expecting pursuit. She did not seem to notice him approaching until his horse was nearly upon her. She spun around with a gasp, nearly losing her footing in the slick mud. Her eyes were wide with fear, and Thaddeus saw her hand move instinctively toward her side, though she carried no weapon that he could see. He raised both hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Easy now," he called over the roar of the storm. "I am not going to hurt you." She stared at him for a long moment, rain streaming down her face, and Thaddeus could see her weighing her options. She was exhausted, that much was clear. Her chest heaved with labored breaths, and she swayed slightly where she stood. The front of her dress was not just muddy, but stained with what looked like blood, though he could not tell if it was hers or someone else's. "Please," she finally said, her voice hoarse and desperate. "Please, I need help." Thaddeus dismounted immediately, keeping his movements slow and deliberate so as not to spook her further. He shrugged off his oilskin coat and moved toward her. "Let me get this on you. You are soaked through." She did not protest as he draped the coat over her shoulders. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably no more than 23 or 24. Her face was pale beneath the mud and rain, and there was a cut above her left eyebrow that had bled down the side of her face. Her hands were scraped raw, fingernails broken and dirty. Thaddeus asked no questions about how she had come to be in such a state. That could wait. Right now, what mattered was getting her out of this storm and somewhere safe. "Can you ride?" he asked. She nodded, though he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "I think so." "Good. My camp is about 2 miles south, in a box canyon with some shelter. We need to get you warm and dry." He helped her up onto his horse first, then swung up behind her. She sat stiffly in front of him at first, but as they started moving and the cold really began to set in, she leaned back against his chest. Thaddeus kept one arm around her waist to steady her, and guided the gelding with the other hand. The string of horses he had been leading followed along behind, used to trailing him. The ride to his camp seemed to take forever in the pouring rain, but finally they reached the narrow entrance to the box canyon. Thaddeus had chosen this spot deliberately when he had made camp the previous night. The high walls provided good shelter from wind, and there was an overhang of rock that created a natural roof over one section. He had left his fire carefully banked, and to his relief, it was still smoldering when they arrived. He dismounted first, then reached up to help the woman down. She nearly collapsed when her feet hit the ground, and he caught her around the waist. "Steady," he said quietly. "I have got you." She gripped his arms, her fingers like ice even through his shirt. "Thank you," she whispered. "I did not think anyone would come." Thaddeus guided her over to the sheltered area and helped her sit down on his bedroll. The ground was relatively dry here, protected by the overhang. He quickly built up the fire, adding larger pieces of wood until the flames were crackling strongly. The heat felt wonderful after the cold rain. "I have got some spare clothes in my pack," he said. "They will be too big for you, but they are dry. You need to get out of that wet dress before you catch your death." She nodded, her teeth chattering. Thaddeus retrieved a shirt and a pair of trousers from his saddlebag, then handed them to her. He turned his back to give her privacy, moving to tend to his horse and the string he had been leading. He unsaddled his gelding and rubbed the animal down, checking each of the other horses as well. They were all skittish from the storm, but otherwise fine. "I am decent," she called after a few minutes. Thaddeus turned back to find her dressed in his oversized clothes, the sleeves of the shirt rolled up several times, and the trousers cinched tight with a piece of rope she must have found in his supplies. She looked like a child playing dress-up, but at least she was no longer shivering quite so violently. She had spread her wet dress out near the fire to dry. He grabbed his other blanket and brought it over to her, wrapping it around her shoulders. Then he sat down across from her and began rummaging through his pack. He pulled out a tin of coffee, some jerky, and a small bag of cornmeal. "It is not much, but it will warm you up," he said, setting about making coffee in his battered pot. She watched him work in silence for a while, and Thaddeus was content to let her gather herself. He could see she was still frightened, still processing whatever had happened to her. Pushing her to talk before she was ready would only make things worse. When the coffee was ready, he poured some into his tin cup and handed it to her. She wrapped both hands around it gratefully, holding it close to her face and breathing in the steam. "My name is Felicity," she said finally. "Felicity Shaw." "Thaddeus Porter," he replied. "Most folks call me Thad." She took a sip of the coffee and closed her eyes briefly. "This is the best thing I have ever tasted." He mixed up some cornmeal with water and a little salt, then shaped it into rough cakes and set them on a flat rock near the fire to cook. The rain continued to pour outside their sheltered area, creating a steady curtain of water at the entrance to the overhang. "You are headed to Marysville?" she asked. "Delivering horses," he confirmed. "Should reach town tomorrow if this rain lets up." "Where were you headed?" Her expression clouded. "I was in Marysville. I was leaving." Thaddeus heard the weight in those words, but did not press. He flipped the cornmeal cakes and waited for them to finish cooking. When they were done, he handed her one on a tin plate along with some jerky. She ate hungrily, and he suspected she had not had a proper meal in some time. They ate in companionable silence, the sound of the rain and the crackling fire filling the space between them. Thaddeus watched her covertly, noting the way her eyes kept darting toward the canyon entrance, the tension in her shoulders that never quite left. Whatever she was running from, she was still afraid it might catch up to her. When they had finished eating, he set about checking her injuries. The cut above her eyebrow had stopped bleeding, but it needed to be cleaned. He heated some water in his coffee pot and tore a strip from his spare bandana. "This might sting," he warned as he gently cleaned the wound. She winced, but did not pull away. "I have had worse." "What happened to your leg?" he asked, noticing again how she kept it stretched out stiffly in front of her. "I twisted my ankle running," she said. "It is not broken, just sore." He nodded and moved on to examining her hands. The scrapes were superficial, but numerous. "You fell?" "Several times. The ground was already muddy before the storm hit." She paused, then added quietly, "I was not watching where I was going. I was just trying to get away." Thaddeus cleaned her hands carefully, noting the way she bit her lip against the pain, but made no sound. When he was finished, he sat back and met her eyes. "You do not have to tell me anything if you do not want to," he said. "But if someone is coming after you, I should know." Felicity looked down at her hands, now wrapped in strips of clean cloth. "I do not think anyone followed me. The storm would have washed away my tracks." "That gunshot I heard?" "My husband," she said, and there was such bitterness in the word that Thaddeus felt his jaw tighten. "Former husband, I should say. I left him 3 days ago." Thaddeus waited, giving her space to continue if she chose. "His name is Marcus Shaw. He owns a saloon in Marysville. When I married him 2 years ago, I thought he was a good man, respectable, kind." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I was wrong about the kind part." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "At first it was just words. He would get angry and say terrible things. Then he started pushing me, grabbing my arm hard enough to leave bruises. I told myself it would get better, that I just needed to be a better wife, but it only got worse." Thaddeus felt a cold anger settling in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "What happened 3 days ago?" "He came home drunk and angry about something at the saloon. I do not even know what set him off. He hit me, and something just broke inside me. I realized that if I stayed, he was going to kill me eventually. So I waited until he passed out, and I ran." "Where were you trying to go?" "Sacramento. I have a cousin there who might take me in. I did not have any money for a stage, so I was walking. I thought I could stay off the main roads, make my way there slowly." She shook her head. I did not count on Marcus coming after me. I thought he would just let me go, be glad to be rid of me. Men like that do not let go easily, Thaddeus said grimly. They see their wives as property. He caught up to me this morning, just before the storm. I had stopped to rest, and suddenly there he was. He had his rifle, and he was screaming at me to come back. I ran, and he fired at me. I do not think he was trying to hit me, just scare me into stopping, but I kept running. She looked at Thaddeus, her eyes bright with unshed tears. If you had not found me, I do not know what I would have done. I was so tired and so cold, and I just wanted to give up. But you did not give up, Thaddeus said firmly. You kept going. That takes strength. She smiled at him then, a small, fragile thing that made her whole face change. You saved my life today, Mr. Porter. Thad, he corrected, and I just did what anyone would do. No, she said, shaking her head. Most men would have asked questions first, or worse, tried to take me back to Marcus. You just helped me, no questions asked. That means more than you know. They sat in silence for a while longer, and Thaddeus found himself studying her face in the firelight. Even exhausted and battered, there was something striking about Felicity Shaw. It was not just her physical appearance, though she was certainly pretty, with delicate features and expressive eyes. It was the strength he could see beneath the fear, the determination that had kept her running even when she wanted to quit. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and as darkness fell, Thaddeus realized they would be spending the night here together. He tried not to think too hard about the impropriety of it. Out here, survival mattered more than social conventions. You should try to get some sleep, he said. You look exhausted. What about you? I will keep watch for a while, make sure no one comes looking. She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. She lay down on his bedroll, still wrapped in the blanket, and within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Thaddeus added more wood to the fire and settled in with his back against the canyon wall, his rifle across his lap. The rain drummed steadily on the rocks above, and Thaddeus let his mind wander. He had been a cowboy for most of his adult life, 32 years now. He had driven cattle up from Texas, broken wild horses in Montana, and worked ranches all across the Western Territories. It was a good life in many ways, free and uncomplicated. But it was also lonely. He glanced over at Felicity, curled up by the fire. There was something about her that called to him in a way he could not quite name. Maybe it was the vulnerability he had seen in her eyes, or the courage it must have taken to run from her husband, or maybe it was simply that he recognized a kindred spirit, someone else who was searching for something better than what life had given them so far. He shook his head at his own thoughts. She was running from one bad situation. The last thing she needed was another man complicating her life. His job was to get her safely to Sacramento, nothing more. But even as he told himself that, he could not quite make himself believe it. The storm finally broke around midnight, the rain tapering off to a light drizzle and then stopping altogether. Thaddeus kept his vigil, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Closer by, water dripped from the rocks above, each drop echoing in the stillness. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Felicity stirred. She sat up slowly, wincing as her various injuries made themselves known. Thaddeus had dozed off at some point, and he jerked awake when he heard her moving. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning." She looked around at the clearing sky. The storm passed. It did. We should be able to make good time today. He stood and stretched, his joints popping. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," she admitted, "but better than yesterday." Thaddeus built up the fire and made more coffee while Felicity carefully pulled on her dress, which had dried by the fire overnight. It was still stained and torn, but at least it was no longer dripping wet. She kept his shirt on underneath for extra warmth. They ate a quick breakfast of jerky and the last of the cornmeal, then Thaddeus saddled his horse and prepared to break camp. The string of horses seemed eager to be moving again after a day and night of standing around. "We have got a decision to make," Thaddeus said, as he helped Felicity up onto his gelding. "I need to deliver these horses to the ranch outside Marysville, but I do not want to take you anywhere near your husband. Sacramento is another day's ride past Marysville." Felicity was quiet for a moment, thinking. "The ranch you are going to, is it far from town?" "About 5 miles northwest. Why?" "Could I stay there while you finish your business? Just for a day or two, until I am strong enough to make the rest of the journey to Sacramento." Thaddeus considered this. The ranch belonged to an older couple named Peterson, and he had dealt with them several times over the years. They were good people, the kind who would not ask too many questions. I think that could be arranged, but what about after? You cannot walk all the way to Sacramento. I will figure something out, she said, but he could hear the uncertainty in her voice. I will take you, he heard himself say. After I deliver the horses, I will take you to Sacramento myself. She twisted around to look at him, surprise written across her face. You would do that? I am not leaving you to fend for yourself after everything you have been through, he said firmly. Besides, I have got no pressing business. A few extra days will not hurt me. I do not know how I can ever repay you. You do not need to repay me. Just promise me that when you get to Sacramento, you will stay safe. Do not let that man find you again. I promise, she said softly. They rode through the morning, following a winding trail that eventually joined up with the main road to Marysville. The landscape was beautiful in the aftermath of the storm, everything washed clean and fresh. The grass was brilliantly green, and wildflowers bloomed along the roadside in splashes of yellow and purple. Felicity relaxed gradually as they rode, her body losing some of its rigid tension. She even began to talk, telling Thaddeus about her life before Marcus. She had grown up in San Francisco, the daughter of a shopkeeper who had died when she was 16. Her mother had passed several years before that. She had worked as a seamstress to support herself. And that was how she had met Marcus when he had come to the shop to have some curtains made for his saloon. He seemed so different back then, she said, charming and attentive. He promised me a good life, a real home. I wanted that so badly that I did not see what he really was. You could not have known, Thaddeus said. Some people are good at hiding their true nature. Do you have family, Thad? She asked. Not anymore. My parents died of cholera when I was 14. I have been on my own since then. That must have been hard. It was what it was. I learned to take care of myself, and I learned not to put down roots. It is easier that way. Easier, she repeated. But lonely, I would imagine. He could not argue with that. Sometimes, but I've always figured it was better to be alone than to be with the wrong person. They rode in silence for a while after that, but it was a comfortable silence. Thaddeus found himself very aware of Felicity's presence, the way she fit against him as they rode, the scent of her hair even beneath the lingering smell of mud and rain. He told himself it was just because he was not used to riding with a woman, but he knew that was not entirely true. By mid-afternoon, they could see the Peterson ranch in the distance. It was a modest spread, with a sturdy house, a large barn, and several corrals. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Thaddeus could see Tom Peterson working near one of the corrals. Tom looked up as they approached, shading his eyes against the sun. When he recognized Thaddeus, he broke into a wide smile and walked out to meet them. "Thad Porter, you old horse thief," he called out. "Right on time as always." "Tom," Thaddeus greeted him, dismounting. He reached up to help Felicity down, noting the way Tom's eyes widened slightly when he saw her torn dress and bandaged hands. To his credit, Tom asked no questions. "Well, you must be hungry after your journey. Come on up to the house and let Sarah feed you. She has been cooking all morning." Sarah Peterson was just as welcoming as her husband, bustling around the kitchen and setting out generous portions of stew and fresh bread. She was a motherly woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. She immediately took Felicity under her wing, clucking over her injuries and insisting she needed a proper bath and some decent clothes. While Sarah whisked Felicity away to get cleaned up, Thaddeus and Tom went out to inspect the horses. Tom was pleased with the stock, examining each animal carefully. "Fine animals as always," he said, counting out payment from a leather pouch. "You have got a good eye, Thad?" "I know what I am doing," Thaddeus said, pocketing the money. Tom hesitated, then asked carefully, "The young lady, is she in some kind of trouble?" "She is leaving a bad situation," Thaddeus said. "I found her out on the trail during the storm. She needs a safe place to rest for a day or two before I take her on to Sacramento." Tom nodded slowly. "She's welcome to stay here as long as she needs. Sarah will enjoy having another woman around the place." "I appreciate that, Tom, and if anyone comes around asking about her—" "We have not seen anyone," Tom finished firmly. "You can count on us, Thad." They went back to the house to find Felicity transformed. She had bathed and was now wearing a simple blue dress that Sarah had given her. Her hair was clean and braided, and the cut above her eyebrow had been properly bandaged. She looked younger somehow, and infinitely more at ease. "That dress suits you," Thaddeus found himself saying, and then felt foolish when he saw the way she blushed. "Thank you, and thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I feel human again." "Call me Sarah, dear, and it is no trouble at all." Sarah patted her hand. "Now, I have made up the spare room for you. You look like you could use a good night's sleep in a real bed." They spent the evening sitting around the Petersons' table, talking easily. Felicity helped Sarah clean up after dinner, and Thaddeus noticed the way she seemed to relax more with each passing hour. It was good to see her smile, to hear her laugh at one of Tom's stories. When it came time to turn in, Sarah showed Felicity to the spare room while Tom set Thaddeus up in the barn. It was comfortable enough, with clean hay and his own bedroll, and Thaddeus had slept in far worse places. But as he lay there staring up at the rafters, he found his thoughts drifting back to Felicity. He barely knew her, had only met her yesterday, but something had shifted inside him when he had found her in that canyon, bedraggled and desperate, but still fighting. He admired her courage, her determination to escape a bad situation, no matter the cost. And there was something else, too, something he was not quite ready to name yet. He told himself he was being foolish. She needed help, not another man trying to claim her. Once he got her safely to Sacramento, she would start a new life, and he would go back to his wandering ways. That was how it had to be. But even as he thought it, he knew he was lying to himself. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Thaddeus woke early and helped Tom with some chores around the ranch, repairing a section of fence and moving some supplies into the barn. It felt good to work with his hands, to focus on simple physical tasks. Felicity appeared around mid-morning, looking rested but still favoring her injured ankle. Sarah had given her a walking stick, and she used it to make her way carefully out to where Thaddeus was working. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. He set down the hammer he had been using and wiped his hands on his trousers. "Of course." They walked slowly toward one of the corrals, where several horses were grazing peacefully. Felicity leaned on the fence, watching them. "I have been thinking," she said, "about Sacramento and my cousin. The truth is I have not seen her in over 5 years. I do not even know if she still lives there, or if she would be willing to take me in if she does." Thaddeus felt his chest tighten. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I do not have much of a plan. I just knew I had to get away from Marcus, and Sacramento seemed as good a destination as any." She turned to look at him. "Sarah offered to let me stay here for a while. She says they could use help around the ranch, especially with the cooking and mending. It would give me time to figure out what I really want to do next." "That is generous of them," Thaddeus said carefully. "It is. But I wanted to talk to you first, because you are the one who saved me. If you think I should still go to Sacramento, I will." Thaddeus was quiet for a long moment, warring with himself. The smart thing would be to encourage her to move on, to put distance between herself and Marysville, but there was a selfish part of him that wanted her to stay, wanted the chance to get to know her better. "I think you should do whatever feels right to you," he said finally. "But if you stay here, you need to be careful. Marysville is only 5 miles away. If your husband comes looking for you, Tom already said he would deny ever seeing me if anyone asks, and I will stay close to the ranch, out of sight." She touched his arm. "I need time, Thad. Time to heal, and time to think about what comes next. Running to Sacramento right now feels like I am still just running, not moving toward anything." He understood that. "Then stay, but promise me you will be careful." "I promise." They stood there by the fence, watching the horses, and Thaddeus felt something settle in his chest. She was staying. He would see her again. "What about you?" she asked. "Where will you go next?" "I have got a job lined up in Placerville, delivering some timber equipment. It is only a few days' ride from here. After that, I do not know yet. I go where the work takes me." "Will you come back here? To check on me, I mean?" He looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, and felt his resolve crumble. "Yes, I will come back." She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Good, I would like that." Thaddeus left the next morning, though he found it harder than he had expected. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that he had known this woman for only 3 days. But as he rode away from the Peterson ranch, he could not help looking back, could not help wishing he had some excuse to stay longer. The job in Placerville took him 2 weeks. It was straightforward work, transporting heavy equipment for a new lumber mill, but it kept him busy and his mind occupied. Or, at least, it mostly kept his mind occupied. He found himself thinking about Felicity at odd moments, wondering how she was doing, if she was healing well, if she was happy at the ranch. When the job was done and he had been paid, Thaddeus found himself heading back toward Marysville without consciously deciding to do so. He told himself he was just checking in, making sure she was safe. It was the responsible thing to do. Tom greeted him warmly when he arrived at the ranch. "Thad, good to see you again. I was wondering if you would come back." "Just passing through," Thaddeus said, but Tom's knowing smile told him the older man was not fooled. "Felicity will be glad to see you. She's up at the house helping Sarah with the preserves." Thaddeus found her in the kitchen, her hands stained purple from berries. She looked up when he walked in, and her whole face lit up in a way that made his heart skip. "Thad, you came back. I said I would." She wiped her hands on her apron and came over to him, and for a moment he thought she might hug him, but she stopped just short, suddenly shy. "How was Placerville?" "Good. The job went well." He gestured at her hands. "Looks like you have been keeping busy." "Sarah has been teaching me to make jam. I am terrible at it, but she says I'm improving." She laughed. Who knew there was so much to learn about preserving fruit? Over the next few hours, Thaddeus caught up on everything that had happened in the past 2 weeks. Felicity's ankle had healed completely, and the cut on her forehead was now just a thin pink line. She seemed more settled, more at peace than when he had left. She had made friends with Sarah, and Tom clearly enjoyed having her around. It was a good situation for her. But as the afternoon wore on, Thaddeus found himself growing restless. He did not want to just catch up on news. He wanted to spend time with her, really talk to her, get to know her better. Finally, he asked if she would like to go for a walk. They walked along the edge of the Peterson property, following a creek that burbled over smooth stones. The grass was tall and golden in the late summer sun, and dragonflies darted over the water. "I missed you," Felicity said suddenly. "Is that foolish of me? We barely know each other, but I missed you." "It is not foolish," Thaddeus said, his heart beating faster. "I missed you too." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "What is this, Thad? Between us, I mean. I feel like something is happening, but I do not know what to call it." He looked at her, at the hope and uncertainty in her eyes, and knew he could not hide his feelings anymore. "I think you know what it is, Felicity. I think you have known since the beginning, same as me. I am still married," she said quietly. "Legally, at least. And I am damaged, Thad. Marcus broke something inside me, and I do not know if I can ever be whole again." "You are not damaged," he said fiercely. "You are strong and brave, and you survived something that would have destroyed a weaker person. And as for your husband, he does not deserve to have any claim on you. You left him. You are free. But the law is not always right. Out here, what matters is what is in your heart." He took a step closer to her. "Tell me what is in your heart, Felicity." She was quiet for a long moment, and Thaddeus held his breath. Then she said, "I am afraid, not of you, but of what I feel for you. It is too much, too fast. I do not trust myself to make good decisions about men." "Then do not make any decisions yet," he said. "Just let yourself feel what you feel. No pressure, no expectations. I will be here, whether it takes weeks or months or years." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she reached out to take his hand. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve goodness," he said simply. "And because I am falling in love with you, and I cannot seem to do anything about it even if I wanted to." She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I am falling in love with you too. It terrifies me, but I am." Thaddeus pulled her into his arms then, and she came willingly, burying her face against his chest. He held her while she cried, stroking her hair and murmuring nonsense words of comfort. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "I need time," she said. "Time to figure out who I am without Marcus, without fear. Can you give me that?" "I will give you whatever you need," he promised. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, not saying much but not needing to. Something had shifted between them, an understanding reached. They were not rushing into anything, but they were not denying what they felt either. It was enough for now. Over the following months, Thaddeus found himself taking jobs closer to Marysville, always finding excuses to return to the Peterson ranch. Tom and Sarah, bless them, never commented on his frequent visits, though he often caught them exchanging knowing looks. Each time he returned, Thaddeus could see Felicity growing stronger, more confident. She was coming into her own, learning skills from Sarah and helping out around the ranch. She was also learning to ride, and Tom had given her a gentle mare named Blossom to practice on. Thaddeus loved watching her canter around the corral, her face flushed with exertion and joy. They talked for hours during his visits, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for the future. Felicity told him about her childhood in San Francisco, about learning to sew from her mother and helping her father in his shop. Thaddeus told her about his years on the trail, about the places he had been and the things he had seen. But they also talked about deeper things. Felicity shared her fears about Marcus finding her, about never being truly free. Thaddeus talked about his loneliness, about always moving from place to place, but never really belonging anywhere. They were both wounded in their own ways, but somehow, being together made them both feel a little more whole. One afternoon in early October, Thaddeus arrived at the ranch to find Felicity waiting for him by the gate. She looked different somehow, more purposeful. "I need to go into Marysville," she said without preamble, "and I want you to come with me." Thaddeus felt his stomach drop. "Felicity, that is not safe. If Marcus sees you, I know, but I cannot keep hiding forever, Thad. I need to face this, to see if he is even still looking for me. And I need to file for divorce. Sarah told me there is a lawyer in town who helps women in situations like mine." He wanted to argue, to tell her it was too dangerous, but he could see the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. She had made up her mind. "All right," he said, "but we do it carefully. We go in, see the lawyer, and leave. No wandering around town, no taking chances." She nodded. Agreed. They rode into Marysville 2 days later, both on edge. The town was bustling with activity, miners and ranchers and businessmen going about their daily lives. Thaddeus kept his hand near his gun and his eyes scanning the crowd, looking for any sign of Marcus Shaw. The lawyer's office was on a side street, away from the main business district. His name was Jonathan Whitfield, and he was a thin, serious man with wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened to Felicity's story without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "You have grounds for divorce," he said when she finished. "Extreme cruelty and abandonment. I can file the papers, but you need to understand that it will take time, months, possibly longer. And if your husband contests it—" "He will contest it," Felicity said quietly. "He will make it as difficult as possible." Whitfield nodded. "Then you need to be prepared for a fight. You will need witnesses who can testify to his treatment of you, and you need to stay out of his reach. If he finds you before the divorce is finalized, he has the legal right to force you to return home." The words hung heavy in the air. Thaddeus felt rage building in his chest at the injustice of it all, but he kept his expression neutral. "File the papers," Felicity said firmly. "I will get your witnesses, and I will stay hidden, but I am done running scared. I want my freedom." They left the lawyer's office with papers to sign and instructions on what would happen next. Thaddeus was just starting to relax, thinking they had made it through without incident, when he heard a voice call out, "Well, well, if it is not little Felicity." They both turned to see a man standing in the doorway of a nearby shop. He was heavy-set and balding, with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. Thaddeus knew instantly who he was, even though they had never met. Marcus Shaw. Felicity went rigid beside him, and Thaddeus instinctively moved to put himself between her and her husband. "You have been looking for me, wife," Marcus said, walking toward them. He was trying to sound casual, but Thaddeus could hear the anger underneath. "Imagine my surprise when I heard you were just at the lawyer's office. Planning to divorce me, are you?" "Stay away from us," Thaddeus said, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus finally looked at him, really looked at him, and Thaddeus saw the moment when the other man assessed him and decided he was a threat. Good. Let him be smart enough to back off. But Marcus was not smart. He was angry and possessive, and he took another step forward. "This is between me and my wife. You have got no business here, cowboy." "She is not your wife anymore," Thaddeus said. "She left you, and she is not coming back. So you can turn around and walk away, or we can have a different kind of conversation." "You threatening me?" "Just stating facts." For a moment, Thaddeus thought it was going to turn violent. He could see Marcus weighing his options, his hands flexing at his sides. But they were on a public street with people watching, and even Marcus was not foolish enough to start a fight he might not win. "This is not over, Felicity," Marcus said, his eyes burning with rage. "You are still my wife, and you will come back to me." "Never," Felicity said, and her voice was steady despite the fear Thaddeus knew she must be feeling. "I will never come back to you." Marcus spat on the ground at her feet, then turned and stalked away. Thaddeus watched him go, every muscle tensed and ready in case the man changed his mind and came back. When Marcus had disappeared around a corner, Felicity let out a shaky breath. "We should go." They rode back to the ranch quickly, not speaking until they were well outside of town. Finally, Felicity pulled her horse to a stop and turned to Thaddeus. "Thank you," she said, "for standing up for me. You do not need to thank me for that. I will always stand up for you." He reached over and took her hand. "But Felicity, now that he knows you are trying to divorce him, he is going to be more dangerous. You need to be even more careful. I know, but I am glad I saw him today. I was so afraid of facing him again, but now I have, and I am still standing. He does not have power over me anymore." Thaddeus admired her courage, even as worry gnawed at him. Marcus Shaw was not the type to give up easily, and now he knew that Felicity was serious about leaving him. That made her a threat to his pride, and men like him did not handle threats well. Over the next few weeks, Thaddeus stayed close to the ranch, taking only local jobs so he could check in frequently. Tom helped him build a small cabin on the far edge of their property, ostensibly as a place for him to stay when he was working nearby. But really, they all knew it was so he could be near Felicity, so he could protect her if Marcus tried anything. The divorce proceedings moved forward slowly, as Whitfield had predicted. Sarah and Tom both agreed to testify about Felicity's condition when Thaddeus had first brought her to the ranch, and the doctor who had treated her for her injuries also agreed to speak on her behalf. But Marcus was fighting at every step of the way, filing motions and delays, and generally being as difficult as possible. Through it all, Felicity remained strong. She worked hard around the ranch, learning more skills and becoming more independent with each passing day. And her relationship with Thaddeus deepened, slowly but surely. They were careful, mindful of propriety, and her still married status. But they spent every possible moment together, talking and laughing, and simply being in each other's company. Thaddeus had never felt this way about anyone before, this combination of deep friendship and intense attraction and simple contentment. He found himself thinking about the future for the first time in years, imagining a life beyond the next job, the next trail. One evening in late November, they were sitting by the creek that ran through the property, watching the sun set. Felicity leaned against him, and Thaddeus had his arm around her shoulders. "What will you do?" she asked quietly. "When the divorce is final, I mean. Will you still want to wander, or will you be ready to settle down?" It was the question he had been asking himself for weeks. A few months ago, I would have said I would never settle down, that the trail was in my blood. But now, I do not know. I think maybe what I was really searching for all those years was not adventure or freedom. I think I was searching for a place to belong. And have you found it? He looked down at her face turned up toward his in the fading light. "I have found you. That is enough for me." She smiled and kissed him softly. They had been careful about physical affection, not wanting to move too fast or complicate things while she was still legally married. But this kiss felt different, felt like a promise of something more. When they finally pulled apart, Felicity said, "When I am free, truly free, I want to marry you, if you will have me." Thaddeus felt his heart swell. "There is nothing I want more in this world." They sat by the creek until the stars came out, making plans and dreaming about their future together. Thaddeus had never felt so hopeful, so certain that things would work out. But that hope was shattered a week later, when Tom came running up to the cabin where Thaddeus was repairing a chair. "Thad!" Tom shouted. "Come quick! It is Felicity!" Thaddeus dropped the chair and ran, his heart in his throat. He found Felicity in the barn, pale and shaking, with Sarah trying to comfort her. "What happened?" he demanded. "Marcus was here," Sarah said, her face tight with anger. "He rode up bold as brass and demanded to see Felicity. When she refused to come out, he said if she did not drop the divorce, he would burn down our ranch with us in it." Thaddeus felt cold rage wash over him. "Where is he now?" "Gone," Tom said. "I told him to get off my property before I shot him for trespassing. But Thad, He is serious. I could see it in his eyes. He is not going to let this go. Thaddeus knelt down in front of Felicity and took her hands. They were like ice. Did he hurt you? No, I never even saw him. I just heard his voice, heard what he said. She looked up at him, and he could see the fear that had been absent for weeks was back in full force. Maybe I should just drop it. Maybe trying to divorce him is not worth putting Tom and Sarah in danger. No, Thaddeus said firmly. You are not giving up. We are not letting him win. But what else can we do? The law is on his side. Even the lawyer said that as long as we are married, Marcus has rights over me. Thaddeus looked at Tom and Sarah, then back at Felicity. An idea was forming in his mind, dangerous, but possibly their only option. We could go to the sheriff, tell him about the threat Marcus made. Threatening to burn down someone's property is against the law, married or not. You think the sheriff would do anything? Sarah asked skeptically. Marcus owns half the businesses in town. He has got influence. Maybe not the sheriff in Marysville, Thaddeus said, but there is a U.S. Marshal who operates out of Sacramento. He does not answer to local politics. If we can get him to listen, maybe he can help. It was a long shot, but it was something. They decided that Thaddeus would ride to Sacramento the next morning and try to speak to the marshal. In the meantime, Tom would keep his rifle loaded, and they would all be extra vigilant. Thaddeus hated leaving Felicity, but he knew this was important. If they could get the law on their side, really on their side, it might be enough to stop Marcus. He rode hard to Sacramento, making the journey in a day and a half instead of the usual 2 days. The U.S. Marshal's office was located in a nondescript building near the state capitol. Thaddeus talked his way past a clerk and was eventually shown in to see Marshal William Hayes, a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Thaddeus laid out the whole story, from finding Felicity in the canyon to Marcus's recent threat. Hayes listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Thaddeus finished, Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You have got a witness to this threat? Someone besides Mrs. Shaw?" Tom and Sarah Peterson both heard it. Hayes nodded. "That helps. And you said this Marcus Shaw owns a saloon in Marysville?" "That is right. I know the place. I have heard rumors about Shaw for years. Some folks say he is involved in more than just running a saloon, if you catch my meaning." Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Problem is, rumors are not evidence. But if he is making threats like this, maybe it is time someone looked into his business a little more closely. So you will help? I will ride down to Marysville and have a conversation with Mr. Shaw. Let him know that threatening to commit arson is a federal offense, and that I will be keeping an eye on him. That should be enough to back him off, at least for a while." It was not a perfect solution, but it was better than nothing. Thaddeus thanked the marshal and headed back to the ranch, feeling slightly more hopeful. When he arrived, he found the place in an uproar. Sarah was crying, Tom was pacing and cursing, and Felicity was nowhere to be seen. "What happened?" Thaddeus demanded, fear clawing at his chest. "She is gone," Tom said, his voice rough with anger and guilt. "Marcus came back last night with 3 of his men. They grabbed her right out of the house while we were all asleep. By the time we realized what was happening, they were already riding away." Thaddeus felt the world tilt. "Why did not you come after me? I have only been gone 2 days. We did not know which way you went, and by the time we figured out what to do, it was too late to track them in the dark." Tom grabbed Thaddeus's arm. "I am sorry, Thad. I should have protected her better." Thaddeus wanted to rage, to break something, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would not help Felicity. He needed to think. "He took her back to the saloon," he said. "He will keep her there, lock her up like a prisoner. He has done it before, according to what she told me." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "I go get her back." Thaddeus checked his gun, making sure it was loaded. "Tom, I need you to ride back to Sacramento and find Marshal Hayes. Tell him what happened and bring him to Marysville. I am going to need the law on my side for this. And what are you going to do in the meantime?" "Whatever I have to do to get Felicity out of there." He rode into Marysville after dark, keeping to the shadows. The saloon was on the main street, a 2-story building with bright lights and loud music pouring out of it. Thaddeus circled around to the back, looking for another way in. There was a back staircase leading up to the 2nd floor, where he assumed the living quarters were. The door at the top was locked, but Thaddeus had learned a few things in his years of wandering. He pulled out his knife and worked at the lock until it clicked open. The hallway inside was dimly lit by a single lantern. Thaddeus moved quietly, checking each room. Most were storage or empty guest rooms. Then he heard it, a muffled sound of crying coming from the room at the end of the hall. The door was locked from the outside. Thaddeus slid the bolt aside and pushed the door open. Felicity was huddled on a bed in the corner, her dress torn again, and a fresh bruise blooming on her cheek. When she saw him, her eyes went wide with shock and relief. "Thad," she whispered, "how did you find me?" He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "I will always find you. Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "He hit me when I tried to fight him, but nothing more than that. He locked me in here and said he was going to keep me here until I agreed to drop the divorce." She clung to him. "How are we going to get out? He has men watching the stairs." "We will figure it out. Can you walk?" She nodded, and he helped her to her feet. They crept back out into the hallway, and Thaddeus was just starting to think they might actually make it when a voice called out behind them. "Going somewhere?" Marcus stood at the other end of the hall, a gun in his hand. 2 of his men flanked him, also armed. "Let her go, Shaw," Thaddeus said, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was pounding. "You have already broken enough laws. Do not make it worse." "Worse?" Marcus laughed. "She is my wife. I have got every right to keep her here. You kidnapped her from someone else's property. You assaulted her. Those are crimes, even if she is your wife. And who is going to arrest me? The sheriff is a friend of mine. He is not going to do anything." "Maybe not, but the U.S. Marshal will." Marcus's expression flickered with uncertainty. "You are bluffing. Try me." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Marcus raised his gun, pointing it directly at Thaddeus. "I am tired of you interfering in my business, cowboy. Maybe it is time someone taught you a lesson." Thaddeus heard Felicity gasp behind him, but he kept his eyes locked on Marcus. His hand hovered near his own gun, but he knew that if he drew, Marcus would fire. He was trapped. Then a voice rang out from the back staircase. "Drop your weapons! This is U.S. Marshal William Hayes." Marcus spun around to see Hayes standing at the top of the stairs, his badge gleaming in the lamplight and his own gun drawn. Behind him, Tom Peterson appeared, looking relieved. "You have got no jurisdiction here, Marshal," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Actually, I do. Kidnapping is a federal crime, Shaw. So is making threats to commit arson. I have got witnesses willing to testify to both." Hayes stepped forward. "Now, I am only going to say this once more. Drop your weapons." Marcus looked around, seeing that he was outnumbered and outgunned. With a curse, he dropped his pistol. His men followed suit. Hayes gestured for them to move against the wall. "Thomas Porter, take Mrs. Shaw downstairs. I will deal with these gentlemen." Thaddeus did not need to be told twice. He took Felicity's hand and led her down the back stairs. They emerged into the alley behind the saloon, and Felicity immediately burst into tears. "It is over," Thaddeus said, holding her close. "You are safe now. He cannot hurt you anymore." "Are you sure? What if he gets away with this?" "He will not. Hayes is going to arrest him, and even if he somehow gets out of jail, he will know that we have got the law watching him. He would be a fool to try anything else." They waited in the alley until Hayes came down with Marcus and his men in custody. The marshal gave them a nod. "You folks should head on home. I will have some questions for you tomorrow, but for tonight, just get some rest." Thaddeus helped Felicity onto his horse, and they rode back to the ranch through the darkness. Neither of them spoke much, both too exhausted and emotionally wrung out. But when they arrived and Sarah came rushing out to embrace Felicity, Thaddeus finally allowed himself to believe that it really was over. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Marcus was charged with kidnapping and making terroristic threats. The trial was quick, and with testimony from Felicity, Tom, Sarah, and even some of Marcus's own employees who had witnessed his abuse, he was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison. More importantly, the judge granted Felicity an immediate divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty. She was finally, legally free. It was a cold January morning in 1873 when Felicity and Thaddeus stood before a minister in a small church in Sacramento, exchanging their vows. Tom and Sarah stood as witnesses, beaming with pride. Felicity wore a simple white dress that Sarah had helped her make, and Thaddeus wore his best clothes, his hair freshly cut and his boots polished to a shine. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Thaddeus kissed her with all the love and hope he had been holding back for months. She kissed him back just as fiercely. And when they broke apart, there were tears streaming down both their faces. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied. "And I promise I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you every single day." They honeymooned in San Francisco, spending a week exploring the city where Felicity had grown up. She showed him the shop where her father had worked, now owned by someone else. They walked along the waterfront and ate at restaurants and made love in their hotel room while the fog rolled in off the bay. When they returned to Marysville, it was to the cabin that Thaddeus had built on the Peterson property. Tom and Sarah had gifted them 5 acres of land, enough for them to start their own small ranch. It was not much, but it was theirs, a place to belong. Thaddeus took local jobs, working with horses and cattle on nearby ranches. Felicity continued to help Sarah with the preserves and took in sewing work as well. They were not wealthy, but they had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. The years passed peacefully. Marcus remained in prison, and when he was finally released in 1878, he left California entirely, heading east. Felicity received word through her lawyer that he had settled in St. Louis and remarried. She felt nothing but relief at the news, closing that chapter of her life for good. In 1874, Felicity gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas after Tom Peterson. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's expressive eyes, and Thaddeus felt his heart expand in ways he had never thought possible when he held his son for the first time. 2 years later, a daughter came along, whom they named Sarah. She was followed by another son in 1879, whom they named William after Marshall Hayes, who had become a friend over the years. Thaddeus proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving. He taught his children to ride and to respect animals. He read to them every night and told them stories about his years on the trail, carefully editing out the rougher parts. And he showed them every day how a man should treat a woman, loving their mother openly and without reservation. Felicity blossomed in their life together. The fear and pain that Marcus had inflicted on her slowly faded, replaced by confidence and joy. She became known in Marysville as an excellent seamstress and a kind neighbor, always willing to help those in need. And she was an amazing mother, nurturing and wise beyond her years. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thaddeus took Felicity back to the canyon where he had found her. It was a warm summer day, nothing like that stormy night so long ago. They sat by the creek, watching the water flow over the rocks. "Do you ever think about that day?" Felicity asked. "What made you ride toward that gunshot instead of away from it?" Thaddeus thought about it. "I do not know. Instinct, maybe, or fate. But whatever it was, I am grateful for it every day of my life." "So am I." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You saved me, Thad, in every way that matters. And you saved me right back. Before I met you, I was just drifting through life, never really living it. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to build something real and lasting." They sat there for a long time, remembering the past and dreaming about the future. Their children were growing up strong and healthy. Their ranch was thriving, small but profitable. And their love had only deepened with time, weathering whatever storms life threw at them. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon in shades of gold and orange, Thaddeus stood and helped Felicity to her feet. "Ready to go home?" She smiled up at him, that same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. "Always, as long as home is wherever you are." They rode back to their ranch hand in hand, the evening air warm around them. In the distance, they could see their children playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Tom and Sarah were sitting on their porch, waving as Thaddeus and Felicity approached. This was home. This was family. This was everything Thaddeus had been searching for without knowing it, found in the most unexpected way on a stormy night in a canyon. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Thaddeus and Felicity lay in bed together. She was curled against his side, her head on his chest, and he was running his fingers through her hair. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About how lucky I am. About how one decision, one choice to ride toward trouble instead of away from it, changed my entire life. Do you regret it? The settling down, I mean. Do you ever miss the freedom of the trail?" "Not for a single second. You are my freedom, Felicity. You and our children and this life we have built together. That is all the adventure I need." She tilted her head up to kiss him, slow and sweet. I love you, Thaddeus Porter, today, tomorrow, and all the days after that. And I love you, Felicity Porter, for the rest of my life and whatever comes after. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, safe and content. Outside, the moon rose over the California hills, casting silver light across the land they called home. The Wild West was slowly being tamed, civilization creeping in from all sides. But here, in this small corner of the world, two people had found something that would never be tamed: true love, hard-won and precious. A gift neither had expected, but both cherished with everything they had. The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of simple joys and everyday challenges. Thomas grew into a serious young man who loved working with horses just like his father. Sarah inherited her mother's talent for sewing and her father's way with animals, a combination that made her uniquely gifted. Little William was the adventurous one, always getting into scrapes and keeping his parents on their toes. In 1885, another daughter arrived, whom they named Grace. She was their unexpected blessing, born when Felicity was 40 and Thaddeus was 45. The older children doted on her, and she became the heart of their family, spoiled and loved by everyone. Tom and Sarah Peterson remained close to them throughout the years, becoming honorary grandparents to the children. When Tom passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1888, the whole family mourned. Sarah moved into a smaller house closer to Thaddeus and Felicity, and they cared for her until she joined Tom in 1892. The ranch prospered modestly. Thaddeus had a gift for breeding horses, and his animals became known throughout the region for their temperament and stamina. Felicity's sewing business grew as well, and she even took on apprentices, teaching young women the trade. They weathered droughts and hard winters, times when money was tight and worry kept them up at night. But they always faced these challenges together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. Their love remained constant, a steady flame that warmed them through everything. In 1895, Thomas married a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was held at Thaddeus and Felicity's ranch, with half the county in attendance. Watching his son exchange vows, Thaddeus felt his eyes fill with tears. He remembered standing before a minister himself, promising to love and cherish Felicity. He had kept that promise, and seeing his son make the same commitment filled him with pride. Sarah married 2 years later, and William followed suit in 1900. Soon there were grandchildren, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Thaddeus and Felicity became the doting grandparents they had always wanted to be, spoiling the little ones and sending them home full of sugar and stories. Grace grew into an independent young woman who surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to become a teacher. Thaddeus and Felicity supported her dream, proud of her ambition even as they worried about her living in town, away from the ranch. But she thrived at the normal school in Sacramento and returned to Marysville to teach at the local schoolhouse. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1903, Thaddeus and Felicity sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the hills. They were both graying now, their faces lined with age and their bodies moving more slowly than they once had. But their hands were still intertwined, fingers laced together as they had been for 3 decades. "Do you know what I think about when I look at you?" Felicity asked. "Like what?" "I think about that scared, desperate woman stumbling through the rain, thinking her life was over. And then I think about the man who found her and gave her hope when she had none left. You changed my life, Thad. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, to keep believing that things could be better. You changed mine too. I was so lost before I met you, just wandering from place to place with no purpose. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stay. Everything good in my life started the day I rode toward that gunshot. We have had a good life, have we not? The best life, better than I ever could have imagined." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. Inside the house, they could hear Grace preparing dinner, humming as she worked. Tomorrow, Thomas and his family would come for Sunday dinner, and the house would be full again. Next week, Sarah was bringing the grandchildren for a visit. Life was good, full of love and family and the simple pleasures they had learned to cherish. Thaddeus thought back to that stormy night in 1872, when he had been just a wandering cowboy with nothing to his name but a horse and a strong back. He had asked no questions when he found Felicity, had simply offered help because it was the right thing to do. He could never have known that single act of kindness would lead to everything he now held dear. "Thank you," he said suddenly. Felicity looked at him in surprise. For what? For trusting me that day? For letting me help you, even though you had no reason to trust any man? For loving me back when I fell in love with you? For giving me a family and a home and a purpose? For 30 years of happiness that I never thought I would have? Tears shimmered in her eyes. The privilege has been all mine, Thad. You are the best man I have ever known, and loving you has been the greatest joy of my life. They kissed softly, tenderly, with all the love of 3 decades behind it. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Come on, Felicity said, standing and pulling him to his feet. Grace has made pot roast, and you know how she gets if we let it get cold. Thaddeus followed his wife into their home, into the life they had built together, from nothing but hope and determination and love. Behind them, the sun finished setting over the California hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. A new night was beginning, but they faced it together, just as they had faced every challenge and every joy for the past 30 years. And they would continue facing whatever came together, hand in hand, heart to heart, for however many years they had left. Because that was what love meant, what the vows they had spoken truly required, to be there for each other, in rain and sunshine, in sorrow and celebration, from that first moment in the canyon until their last breath. The story of how Thaddeus found Felicity, torn and muddy and desperate, and asked no questions while offering help, became a family legend. They told it to their children, who told it to their grandchildren, who would tell it to generations yet unborn. It was a story of courage and kindness, of choosing to help a stranger and finding love in the most unexpected place. But more than that, it was a story of second chances. Felicity had been given a second chance at life and happiness when Thaddeus had found her. And Thaddeus had been given a second chance at finding a place to belong, a family to call his own. They had taken those chances and built something beautiful and lasting, a love that weathered storms and grew stronger with each passing year. Years later, when Thaddeus was an old man of 78, he sat on that same porch with his great-grandchildren playing at his feet. Felicity sat beside him, her hair completely white now, but her eyes still as bright and warm as ever. One of the great-grandchildren, a little girl with Felicity's dark eyes, climbed into Thaddeus's lap. "Great-grandpa, tell us the story again," she begged, "about how you found great-grandma in the storm." Thaddeus smiled and began the tale once more, his voice strong despite his age. "It was 1872, and I was just a cowboy delivering horses through the mountains between Sacramento and Marysville. A terrible storm broke over the canyon, and I heard a gunshot echo through the rain." Felicity listened with a soft smile on her face. Even though she had heard this story hundreds of times, it never got old, this tale of how they had found each other. She reached over and took Thaddeus's free hand, and he squeezed it gently without pausing in his story. The children listened with rapt attention, their eyes wide with wonder. They loved this story, this piece of family history that had shaped all their lives. Because without that stormy night, without Thaddeus riding toward danger instead of away from it, none of them would exist. When the story was finished and the children had been called away by their parents, Thaddeus and Felicity remained on the porch. The sun was setting again, as it had set thousands of times since that first fateful day. "I would do it all again," Thaddeus said quietly. "Every moment, every choice, it all led me here, to you, to this life. I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Felicity agreed. "Not the pain, not the fear, not even Marcus. Because all of it was necessary to bring us together. And what we have built together, was worth every struggle." They sat there as the stars came out, two old souls who had found each other when both needed it most. They had lived a full life together, rich with love and family and purpose. And though they knew their time was growing shorter, they faced the future without fear, knowing they would face it together. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the beginning or the end, but all the days in between. All the moments of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle that they had shared. All the ways they had supported each other, challenged each other, loved each other through everything life threw their way. Thaddeus Porter had ridden toward a gunshot in a storm and found his destiny. Felicity Shaw had been running from death and found new life. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love that would echo through generations. And when historians looked back at the Wild West years later, they might write about the cowboys and the outlaws, the gold rushes and the cattle drives. But they would miss the quieter stories, the ones that truly mattered, stories like Thaddeus and Felicity, two ordinary people who found extraordinary love in the midst of chaos and built a life worth living. This was their story. This was their legacy. And it was more than enough.